Okay. Is it recording for you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Hi, everyone. Just a quick introduction. Angelina Jesus.
Rob Osmondson.
Jessica Long.
Tessa Stanton.
Danielle Fulton.
And then we got Dave.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Dave Hirsch.
All right. Sounds good. So today we're doing the interview. So I will hand it over to Danielle for the opening introduction.
Yeah, I was going to do the opening.
Okay.
Okay.
So Rob, sorry.
Okay. Everybody ready for this? So, hello, David. Thanks for coming to speak with us today. We're going to be interviewing you for a position on our team, and I'd like to start by introducing myself. I'm Rob Osmondson. There's 4 other members with us today, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Danielle.
Hi, I'm Angelina Jesus.
I'm Tessa Stanton.
Hi, I'm Jessica Long.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. So before we begin today, I'd like to make sure inform you that the information that you give during this interview will be kept private and only shared with the team and instructor. So with that, I will turn it over to Danielle with her list of questions.
Hi, Dave. So tell us a little about yourself.
Okay. Originally, I was born in Buffalo, New York. Moved out to Arizona when I was 14 with my family. Been here ever since. Went to ASU for a while back in the 80s. Was not a good student. Left ASU, started working. And then basically have been working in computer programming and computer programming management ever since then. So been married for 28 years, 2 kids, 2 dogs, some cats. That's about it.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm a director at American Express, managing a technical team. However, most of the team and myself have been displaced, so I'm kind of like winding down that team, transferring a lot of the responsibilities offshore. And my last day at American Express will be in December.
How long have you been in that position?
I've been doing this particular job for 10 years. I've been at Amex for 20 years total.
Okay, and that answers my next question, so I'll go on to the following. Have you held any other position within the company?
Yeah, I've been a computer programmer, project manager, at various times.
Okay, that's the last of my few questions, so I will go ahead and pass it back to Rob and Tessa.
Okay.
We're going to talk a little bit about, I guess, criticism within your job or how you have dealt with criticism. So within the teams you've led in the past, what types of constructive criticism have you had?
About me, about myself. So the one thing that's always really, really consistent is I tend to under-communicate. So that's something I've just heard over and over again. So that can be with team members, that can be, sending out information to the senior leadership, no matter what it is. If you know the Myers-Briggs personality types, I'm an INTJ. And INTJ is basically, I'm an introvert. Just spend a lot of time thinking inside my own head, kind of working stuff out. and I don't really see the need to communicate with people, I'm assuming that everyone knows everything that I know. So why would I say anything? Why would I bother somebody, waste their time, send them an email, whatever? So that's always been a problem. The problem, really the big problem, is how it manifests on my team, is that my team does not get credit for work that they've done because I'm not out there promoting, and that's a very big thing in the Amex culture. So I think that's probably, that's the most consistent feedback I'd say I give it.
So with that in mind, my next question actually is, how have you made your team understand that they matter? You just said you have issues with that. So how have you sort of gotten past that to help them or to make them feel that they matter?
Yeah. So with them, you know, like on an individual basis, I think it's not so bad. It's because when I'm discussing it with people, I don't have a problem. It's just me initiating. If I'm not talking to them, then I have trouble kind of, you know, with the intercommunication. So when I'm talking to people, you know, I'm always trying to connect them to the work, right? And that work to whatever the organization's goals are, right? So I just want to make sure that everyone understands where they fit into that big picture. The work itself is critical, right? Whatever they're doing, it has to be done. It has to be done well. There was a, you know, probably the best example I had, really the best CEO I've ever seen at another job. He invited everyone, the entire company, to a big meeting. And like his advertising poster says, you'll see something you've never seen before and you'll never see again at the meeting. So everybody's like kind of intrigued. They want to go see the meeting. And so when he got there, he started talking. He held up a peanut in its shell, right? And he cracked the peanut open and he showed you the little peanut inside. And he goes, no one has ever seen this peanut before. In the history of mankind, nobody's ever seen this one peanut. And everybody kind of laughed. And he goes, that's what you should think about when you're talking to our customers. That interaction that you're having right then with the customer has never happened before. It's a unique thing, and it's critically important to our company that you understand that every time you talk to a customer, even when you're doing it internally, every conversation that you have is a unique thing, right? And so you have to take it really, really seriously. And then he popped the peanut in his mouth and said, and now you'll never see it again, right? So at the end, like, they handed out bags of this was before peanuts were a thing. Like, you couldn't, you know, now you would get sued out of your mind if you handed out peanuts to people. But this was back in the, you know, 90s, so it was okay. You could hand out peanuts to people. But I think that's part of it, right? Like, he just connected, like, whatever you're doing, you know, in relation. It seems like, you know, if you're doing a customer service job or whatever else, it seems like, well, you know, I've got so many calls I have to get through today. I have so many interactions I have to get through. But really, each one of those is critical. And that's why, you know, doing those kind of jobs is critical. The other thing, too, trying to make sure that my people understand that they matter is separate from work, right? Understanding what their personal situations are, right? So if somebody comes to me and they say, you know, I've got to stay home Friday. I've got to work from home Friday because I'm getting a water heater installed, or I'm going to be on vacation for 3 weeks, or I'm going to go to India for 6 weeks, and I'm going to dial in occasionally. Like, I always make that work for them. I never say, no, you can't do it, right? Because it's so important to them. You know, I always say, like, whatever you're doing in your life is more important than the work stuff, right? Because, you know, I've got a big team. I've got people who are going to cover for you. But at home, there's nobody who's going to jump in and be a dad to your kid, or be a mom to your kid, or, you know, be a wife, husband, son, daughter, whatever roles you have outside of work. You're unique in that aspect. They need you more than I do, right? Because I can always cope. I'm a good manager. I can swap stuff around. But whatever you're doing outside, that's important to you. That's also more important to me than the work. The work, you know, American Express is going to be fine if you take a day off. You know, it's not going to crumble. Despite what your ego may tell you, it's really not. It's going to be all right. So I think it's important that you treat people in that manner. Let them know that whatever they're doing, it's important to you as well.
I agree. The next question is actually a two-parter. It's how many team members are in your team right now, and do you have any off-site team members in your team?
Yeah, so I have, like I said, I've had about 30 total up until midpoint of this year. About half and half, maybe slightly more, were in the U.S. I would say between 10 and 15 were offshore in India at various locations.
All right, Dave. So how would you handle any concerns you might have with the teammate that you don't work directly with in your office, those offsite team members?
Yeah. So that's hard. Like, really, though, a lot of it is just really paying attention to the management of it, right? So you've got to really agree on stuff. You've got to make sure that everyone has the same understanding. You've got to put that understanding in writing. It's got to be, we're going to produce X by this date. You're going to send me such and such by this date. Just make sure that it's really, really crystal clear what those deliverables are. Because if you have somebody that's not working up to speed, is not working to the same level that everybody else is, you have to try to expose that. You have to try to make sure that that's obvious to everybody, that the email didn't arrive, the project wasn't updated, whatever, you're trying to do. I've had people offshore like that. And it can be really, really difficult if you don't have some way to measure the productivity, if you don't have some way to measure the response and the response times getting back to you, because you're really just kind of flying blind. It's much better to have someone that you trust in that location who can kind of be your eyes and ears. I had trouble with one guy offshore one time, just trying to get the work out. It was always an excuse. There was always some reason. And we finally hired somebody else to kind of be a manager over him. And it just helped the whole situation, because then you got a true read on, what the story is or what that guy's really doing with his time. So I think that's a big thing. But in general, what you don't want to have happen is you don't want it to turn into one of those out of sight, out of mind kind of things, either on your situation or on his behalf, right? You don't want to forget about him and then, come back, a week later and go, what were we supposed to be doing? What were you supposed to be working on? Because if they don't feel that you're managing them, if they don't feel that you're working actively with them, maybe they get the impression that it's not, whatever they're doing, it's not that important.
Okay. So a constant stream of communication is pretty vital.
Yeah. That's just generally true, right?
Yeah. So generally speaking, if you could create, say, your perfect team, how would you structure it, and how many people would be in it?
So I don't think there's a necessarily one best size. It really depends on what the assignment is going to be. So in my, so one of the things I think about in my position, if I'm, staffing my team, I have to have enough swim lanes. I have to have enough avenues of work, because really what I can do is I can put one lead, one of my top people, in charge of something, but I can't really put two of my top people on that. So I have four good leads, so I can have four kind of channels of work that are going on, where they each have room to operate, they each have room to do something. Now within that, they'll have varying, numbers of programmers or business analysts or project managers that are working in association with that. But I've had situations where I get, maybe a fifth person comes in who's really strong, who's really competent. I just don't have enough to give them to keep them interested in the job. Without them going in and cannibalizing one of the existing teams and making one of my existing leads unhappy. It's just hard to, if I don't have that much work, it's hard to keep it, much larger than that. But that's, I think, one of the key things about what the job of a leader is. The leader really has to decide, what that structure is going to be, what the organization is going to be, and how it's going to kind of conduct itself. I think it doesn't really get enough attention to talk about, everybody always talks about motivation for leaders and things like that, but really they don't talk about the role that the manager and the leader has to play as far as just setting stuff up and just organizing, making sure that people understand what their portfolio of work is going to be. I want that team to be self-managing. I want them to be able to figure things out on their own and kind of be their own unit. I don't want to have to make every decision for them. They should have, you know, their mission. They should have a clear set of goals, things like that, just so that, you know, I can set up, so if I want them to do something, if I want them to, you know, really hit some productivity kind, you know, this is all the stuff I kind of have to think about ahead of time, how I'm going to do stuff. So if I say, Tessa, you know, I'm going to give you a project. It's a pretty big project. How long is it going to take you to get that done? And Tessa says, oh, it's going to be 6 weeks for her to do that project. And I'll say, no way, right? There's no way you're going to have that. Maybe you don't understand, but there's no way you're going to have that done in 6 weeks. And what I'm looking for Tessa to go, no, I can get it done, right? Because that's what I want. I want somebody to take ownership of that date besides me. I want somebody else to go, oh, no, I'm going to have it done by this date. Now, I didn't push Tessa into that, right? But the important thing is now she feels challenged. She's going to try and get it done. She's actually probably going to get it done in 4 weeks. Because now her, you know, part of her motivation is she's going to prove she's right and I'm wrong. And there's nothing I like more that, you know, I can go to my next meeting, I can go to a big town hall meeting with 100 people in it. There's nothing I'd like better than to talk about Tessa, how great she is and how she, you know, got this project done in only 4 weeks instead of 6 weeks, and what a great amount of work it was, right? So I think that's very motivational. I think the leader has to kind of think of those strategies and build all that stuff in when thinking about the team and how the team's going to work and how big the time is going to be.
Okay. So here, reflecting on the past when you've been working in a team, if you could go back and give yourself some advice in a previous teamwork environment, what would it be?
Okay, so I have a time machine and I'm going to go back. So
Yeah.
This Dave is going to go back and he's going to find 20-something-year-old Dave, and he's going to talk to 20-something-year-old Dave. I'm going to jump out of the time machine and I'm just going to run at 20-something-year-old Dave, and I'm just going to scream at him to separate your mouth from your emotions. Because that was the thing. I mean, it took me forever to figure this out. I don't know why I was so dumb. But, you know, my mouth and my thoughts and my emotions were just hardwired together for so long. So if I thought it, I said it. And there was no filter, there was no break, there was no nothing. Because, you know, it's just like boom, boom, boom. And it turns out that's probably not the best way to go through life. It's certainly not the best way to be a leader. It just took me a lot of time to figure that out. I would come home at night, walk in the door at 6 o'clock at night, and the kids would be there doing their homework or whatever. My wife would be, you know, puttering around, or she'd start, you know, working on dinner or what, you know, whatever she's doing and all that kind of stuff. And when I walk in the door, here's what I see. The garbage cans are still out on the street. Nobody brought them in, right? The porch light is on. I don't know why the porch light is on. It's 6 o'clock. It's not even dark out, right? So I don't know how it got turned on, right? The dog doesn't have any water in its dish, right? I mean, I haven't set anything down yet. I still have my keys in my hand and I know all this kind of stuff. Nobody brought in the mail. Nobody took out the recycling can, right? This is what I'm seeing when I'm walking in the door. And so I would point all of those things out, right? Trying to be as helpful, not really being helpful. I would point all those things out to my wife. And then later on in the evening, I'd go, boy, my wife seems a little down today. Maybe she had a bad day at work. I don't know what's wrong, like, because I'm stupid, I guess, right? Maybe the kids were bad. I don't know maybe what happened, right? And so I would do it like on a Friday night, and I would go, man, my wife was in a bad mood all weekend. I don't know what happened. Like, something seems like it must have been off. Like, wow, she's really struggling with something. And then finally I started, so this is funny. So finally I figure out, don't do that on Fridays, dummy. Walk in the door and say something nice. Like, you're pretty, I love you, whatever it is, right? Just, you know, if the dog's water dish is empty, just go fill it up. You know, don't point it out. Just do stuff, right? And then all of a sudden the weekend started being a lot better, right? Like, oh, she's not, you know, kind of mad at me this weekend. And so it took me about 2 more years to figure out, oh, I should do it on Thursdays too. Like it was just like I had it in my head. It was just a Friday thing. And I was like, oh, I could actually do that every day of the week. Just walk in and be nice and not say something stupid, right? And things go a lot better. So I just ask her how she is, you know, pat the kid, kiss the kids on the head while they're doing their homework, all that kind of stuff. And so things started to get like a lot better. And so now when I walk in the door, right, I just learned like this applies to everything. But now when I walk in the door, a lot of times she'll hand me a glass of wine, you know, and it's like, oh, now, you know, I don't say anything anymore. Just now her conditioning has changed too, right? So now she reacts in a nice way when I walk in the door. If I'm home first and she walks in, I hand her a glass of wine. It's just a much better deal all the way around, you know. So that's the biggest thing. I don't know why it took me so long to learn, but that's what, you know, this Dave would tell the old Dave. And it applies to everything. And I've gotten totally like in that frame of reference. The first time I see somebody that day, first time I see somebody, you know, in the evening, if I haven't seen them for a while, just don't say something nasty. Just, you know, just say something nice, right? It's like, I had a boss recently that would, just the first time I would see her in the morning, it was always what was wrong, what didn't happen, how mad her boss is at her, you know, and it's just like, why do we start out the day that way? Just, you know, give me, you know, ask me how my evening was, ask me how the weekend was. Just don't launch into it right away, because it kind of kills the mood, you know.
Okay. All right. I will hand it over to Jess now.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of your leadership style. So tell me a little bit about how you motivate your team.
So motivation is not just like all about the big speeches, right? It's not like standing up there and rah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot about what I've been talking about. I think I'm really convinced that there's more ways to demotivate people than there are to motivate people, right? Because there's just so many things you can do to turn people off. I had probably my best personal leader that I had when I would get stuck early in my career, when I would get stuck on some programming problem that I'm working on, he would just look at it and he'd go home, have a beer. He's like, I think you're really, really close to solving it. He's like, you'll get it solved tomorrow, but just go home and relax. It's fine, right? Like, I would run through a brick wall for that dude. To this day, I would run through a brick wall for that dude because he was just so good. You know, it was like, but it wasn't because he was making a speech. It was just like, you know, he respected me, he liked me, and he made that very obvious, and he trusted me that I was going to figure stuff out. So he was great. There's another way too, though. Like one time I was managing a team, and we worked for a pharmaceutical market research company. And so one of the big pharmaceutical companies needed some data from us, and it was kind of a dumb story, but they didn't give us enough time to kind of customize the data for them. So I was reporting to the CIO, the Chief Information Officer of the company. And he said, well, we have to get this data for them, we have to customize it, and we have to have it to them in 3 weeks. And there's no failure. You have to deliver on this. And I was like, I can't do it. You know, I just told him, I'm like, there's one program, and just because of the nature of computer programming, I can't have 3 people work on it and get to the deadline. Only one person can kind of work and test on it at a time. And I didn't really, you know, I had enough people. I could have had 8 people work on it, but I couldn't change more than just that one program. So it was kind of like going to be single threaded. They were going to, you know, 3 sets of changes. They were going to do them one at a time. And it was going to take me, each person was going to work on it for about a week and a half. And there was just no way I could figure out like how to get it all done. So I just told him it can't be done. So the next day he left, he went on a road trip somewhere. And the next day he calls me and he goes, so Dave, did you figure out how to get that done yet? And I went, no, I told you I can't get it done. I don't know how to get it done. And he goes, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. And he hung up. And I was like, oh, crap, he's going to call me. You know, and then the next day he calls me again. He's like, hey, did you figure it out yet? And I'm like, no, it's not going to happen, Larry. I can't. And he's like, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. And I'm just like, oh, he's going to call me every day. Like, you know, and so now I'm motivated. Now I have to figure out, like, how am I going to make this work, right? So that's another, that's maybe not the best positive side of motivation, but, you know, that kind of pressure, you know, bringing on somebody is also a way that leaders have to use sometimes. I'm sure if Larry didn't do that to me, I wouldn't have bothered to figure out the answer. But, you know, if I knew he was just going to keep pestering me, so I figured I better just go ahead and figure it out. But I think in general, it's good to treat people nicely. If I'm going to have, you know, if I ask Jessica, if I ask you to write a status report or give me a, you know, an operation manual on how we're supposed to use the new equipment or something like that, and you do that and you give that back to me, and I look at it and I say, this is great. This is fantastic. I didn't even ask for this part where you drew the technical diagrams. That's really good. Can I use this as a template? Because I really want to make a library of all of these. Can I tell the team that we're going to use your report as the template? I want them all to look like that, right? The next time I need you to do something, right? The chance of you going, yeah, Dave likes my work. He knows I'm the best at it, whatever, right? Whether it's, you know, first thing on a Monday morning and I need it in a rush, or it's late on a Friday, you know, to me, that motivation is like, it's an energy, it's an electricity, right? And so you are, to me, my team, each person, they are batteries. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to charge them up, right? And I don't need it today, right? I'm just putting stuff in. I'm just giving you a little charge, a little jolt. Eventually, I know I'm going to need it. Eventually, I'm going to need to call you in on a weekend and work when you didn't plan on it, right? And that's when I'm going to drain the battery. But for now, I'm going to try to charge you up. I'm going to try to do that with everybody. And then situationally, if I need to call people in or I need to ask them to work extra, that's what I have in reserve, essentially, you know. I had a team over Christmas break a couple of years ago. I had 3 people. They were going to work all Christmas break. I was going to be off for like 3+ weeks. So I had to find something for them to do. So I gave them a really big project. And I said, when I get back in January, we're going to go through this, just do all this stuff. I gave them everything. Here's what I want you to do. I got back in January, and what they handed me was a disaster. It was horrific. Like, I couldn't, because these are 3 high-level competent people that are professional and work hard and all that, and they couldn't have handed me a bigger pile of garbage. And I was just like, I couldn't, you know, I just stopped, disconnect the mouth from the emotion. And I looked at it, and there was a couple things that they gave me which were interesting. At least they were kind of different, but the basics of what I had, you know, kind of laid out for them, they didn't do well at all. And so my first takeaway from that is that's my fault, right? I didn't explain it well enough, because there's no way that all 3 of these people are just going to make a complete blunder out of it. And so I must not have explained it well enough. And so to this day, if you asked any of those 3 people about that, they have no idea I was disappointed in what they handed me. I never said anything about that. I said, you know, I sat them down. I said, there was really some good stuff in here that I didn't even think about. I said, the other stuff, you know, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at that. We'll review that some more later. But I really want to focus on the stuff that I thought at least was interesting to them. There was no reason for me to get into it. I know it's my responsibility to make sure that they get the work done. I know that they didn't like kind of slough it off and, you know, not put a good effort into it. It's just, it was not what I wanted at all. But I think at that point, I'm going to be draining that battery if I start dogging them for it, if I start, you know, ripping them for it. And there's just no reason for me to do that in that case.
Okay. And talking about your employees, how do you make sure that they feel valued?
So I talked a little bit about that before, right? Explain them their role, why it's vital to the company. Really make sure that they understand, you know, why that's important to us getting everything done, why that's the priority. and really their career too, because I want them to say, you know, where are you going to be in 5 years from now? Let's make sure that whatever you're doing now kind of prepares you for that. If I have to give you extra assignments or assignments on the side to make sure that you do that, I'm going to do that, right? Just to make sure that you feel like you're appreciated. I still, though, you know, there's a part of me that says, when Jimmy Johnson was the head football coach of the Dallas Cowboys, he had a situation in a team meeting where one of the players, a rookie, fell asleep in the meeting room, and Jimmy Johnson cut him from the team immediately. Just no questions asked, right? And so later on, he was telling the press about this, and they asked him, well, what would you do if Troy Aikman or Emmitt Smith fell asleep in the meeting, kind of as superstars? And he said, I'd tap him on the shoulder very gingerly, and I'd say, can I get you a pillow? So there's the side that also says you have to have some form of differentiated treatment in some cases with your staff to say, you're my superstar, I'm really going to treat you well, right? And it doesn't apply to everything, right? If you're running, you know, if everybody's on the same level, everybody's part of a team, you have to treat everybody the same. But if you have people that have additional responsibilities, have additional leadership roles, or, you know, have put in a lot of extra effort, I'm going to reward them more, right? I'm going to give them the best opportunities, the best assignments, send them out of town for travel, whatever it's going to be. And people just have to understand that. You know, I've had people come up to me and say, you know, I kind of got an average rating this year. It wasn't that great. What do I need to do to really get the top rating? And I say, you know, the first thing is you really, you know, the people you're competing with, since, you know, I've got to distribute the ratings over my team and I only have so many of the top ratings to give, you've got to look at the people who are getting the really good ratings now. And if they're working their butts off, you know, and they're working, you know, nights and weekends to get stuff done, and you're leaving, you know, 2 hours early on a Friday to go to happy hour, it's going to be really tough for you, you know, to kind of get the rating that they have. I don't know how I would explain it to them, right? To say that the person who's kind of taking it easy and not delivering as much is going to get the better rating. There's no way. So, I mean, that person left my team not too long after because they knew there was no way. They didn't want to try to outwork those dudes. The dudes are just crazy, just working tons. So I think that's part of it too. If you really have the superstars and you're in the right kind of situation, you really have to kind of give them extra, bigger bonuses, all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that they really know that they're valued.
Okay. And how do you empower your associates?
So, you know, a big part of it is just you trust them, right? I'm trying to give them kind of a section of work or whatever, but I'm not trying to make every decision for them, right? So I want them to kind of bring their knowledge, their skills, their creativity to whatever problem that they're trying to solve. And I want them to do that, right? Because I can't go in and solve everybody's problem for them. And so a big part of that is then I'm not going to second guess them, right? They're not always going to be right. I'm not always right. But when they say, well, I'm going to do it this way, or I'm going to, contact this person, or I'm going to, send out this email, that's what they did. And it kind of gets back to just kind of a coaching mentality. I want to know why they did it. I want to know from their perspective what they saw and what they were thinking while they did it. But it's not, I'm just not going to float in there and go, well, it's not the way I would have done it. Because once you start doing that, I think you just go down a bad path. Then they're like, well, great, I'm not as smart as Dave and Dave's opinion, so why should I ever expend the energy again? Why should I ever put forth the effort? Because that's really what I'm asking them to do, is I'm asking them to go on a limb. Easiest thing in the world is for me to burn them every time something goes bad, right? But no one wants to work for that person. No one wants, I wouldn't retain any of my good people if we did that. But part of it too is that I want them to take on kind of a challenge. If they say they can get something done in 2 weeks, then good, let them get it done in 2 weeks and see if they can. But I think they feel empowered because of that. At the end of the day, they know my phone number. If they get stuck and they really don't know what they're doing, or they get in a jam, they know they can call me. But they also know I'm going to we'll just deal with whatever the ramifications are.
how do you read different types of employees differently?
So I think you have to understand what motivates each person, right? Because it's not the same for everybody. And so that's going to lead, if your big thing is you want time off or you need, whatever flexibility in your schedule, if that's important to you, I'm going to try to give you that, right? Some people it's just money, so I can just give them money, and try to do that. You really have to figure out what motivates each person. Some people it's just the opportunity to do something else, right? They want to have extra skills, they want to do extra things. So I think you really have to understand your people. You really have to get in their heads and understand, what is in there. And so I think people respond to things just so differently. It's almost inevitable that you're going to treat employees differently. A lot of them will want to spend a lot of time with me, a lot of time just on one-on-ones, just talking. Some people, that's the last thing they want to do. If you told them they had to be locked in a room with me for one-on-one for 30 minutes, they'd want to, just run away screaming. So each person is different, though. And I think that just is a lot of it once you get to understand them.
Okay. And then how do you get your team to understand what matters to the overall objection and what actions are valued?
So it's all situational, like most things. You really want to reward the right behaviors. You really want to hold up the people who did things as a good role model, right? And kind of make sure, if you can catch them doing something right, that's great, right? That's what they always say, like just try to find something that they did, because that's a positive reinforcement. I remember I had a leader one time, she had a big group of us. It was probably 60 people, and we met every week, all 60 of us plus her in a room. It was like a big room, and she would throw out M&Ms, like little tiny bag of M&Ms to maybe 4 people, maybe 5 people in the room every week, right? And she would just throw them at you, right? And it was like the biggest motivational thing to just hear that vice president, just talk about you for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and throw you a bag of M&Ms. People used to take those. They'd eat all the candy, of course, but then they'd take the wrapper and they would pin them on their walls in their cubicles. So you could see how many times they had won the M&Ms, right? It was just such a tremendous motivating thing, for all these technical people who, it's not like anybody was starved for M&Ms. Everybody could go buy their own M&Ms, right? It wasn't a thing like that. But it was the simplest thing. It was, just a symbolic thing. But I think people were really, really into that for whatever reason. It was just a huge motivator for people. So I think that's a lot of ways, just to hold up the right behaviors, the right actions, and make sure that people know that's what gets recognized.
Okay. And my last question for you is, how do you coach employees on how to know what the priority is?
So you have to be really, really crystal clear, but I think it's, for me, it's a framework, right, of how to go through, how to make decisions, what's important, what's not. So one time I remember we had talked about prioritization. I can always tell what the priority is that they should be working on, what is the number one thing that they should be doing. And so I try to teach them how we should all look at that stuff kind of jointly. How, everybody should kind of be on the same page. And so if I say the number one thing is make sure you take care of the customer, right, then they know that's the number one thing. Now, if you have to violate a rule, if you have to, bend some rule to make sure that happens, that's where you kind of get into the gray area. So we talk about a lot of those kind of things just to make sure, if it's somebody who's just trying to get around the procedures, don't let them do that. If you've got a senior vice president that's traveling and is stuck in an airport somewhere in Europe and they need access to a system, make it happen, right? Don't throw up a lot of the red tape, and we'll worry about the ramifications afterward. But if you set the clear message, right, that it is, let's make sure you service people, let's make sure that the customers get what they want and you're not overly bureaucratic. there's a lot to that, but I think in general, as long as everybody kind of knows what the pecking order is of the priorities of what you're trying to solve, I think that helps a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to hand it over to Angela.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for answering all the questions so far. I just had a couple questions around conflict and conflict resolution. My first question is more of a three-part question. If you can tell me about a time where you had to handle conflict within your team, and also tell me a little bit about how it affected your work and the team, and then what came of it, the result of the conflict.
So when you talk about conflict, the first one that comes into my mind, and there's a number of them, but the first one is when I was a programmer just working as part of a team, still fairly junior as a programmer, and I was on a team, I think it was 8 of us plus the manager, and I had a problem. I was working on a project, and one other person was kind of assigned to be working on the project with me, but they weren't really pulling their weight. They just weren't doing what they needed to do. They also had a video store. They were running, like, they had their own video store that they were running on the side, or whatever, at nights or whatever. And so they were spending all their day while they were sitting there at work, like working on video store stuff. And it's like, we have to get working on the programming, and they just weren't delivering. They just weren't contributing at all. So I went to the manager and I said, we're falling behind on the project. I can't keep up on myself. I need this other person to kind of kick it into gear and start, doing their job. And so the manager scheduled a meeting with me to talk about it. And I went to the meeting and the other person was there. So it was just the 3 of us now. And so the manager just said, "So Dave, why don't you tell so-and-so what you don't like about them?" And I was like, oh, wow, that is not the way I would have handled it. So it just became tremendously uncomfortable. It was just a horrible, horrible meeting. And I was trying to be very factual. I wasn't trying to get into anything else. But yeah, it was a nightmare. That's
Wow.
me as a team member. That's the worst thing I can remember.
If you were the leader in that situation, how would you have handled that?
Well, obviously you want to go to that person and find out what the truth is, right? Make sure that you get the same story from both sides. Step in, right? Manage what you have to manage. If you have to bring more resources in, bring more resources in. If you have a bad employee, whether it was me or the other person, figure that out, but get in there and deal with it, right? Don't just make do like a gladiator thing where you have your 2 employees battle it out, right? And, one is going to be the winner and one's going to be, that's just a very poor way to handle it. So I think you just have to intervene. I think you have to find out if you've been kind of lackadaisical in your management style and you're not really paying attention to what people are doing, you really need to step in and find out.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that. My last question was, have you ever had to play devil's advocate as a team member or as a leader? And tell me about that situation.
Yeah, I usually am the devil's advocate. I just always kind of take that approach to things. I don't know why. And in that situation on that team, that's essentially what I was, right? It was like the other 7 people plus the manager eventually kind of got like versus me. It was kind of like I would say things and none of them would like it. Just the entire team kind of turned on me plus the manager. Normally devil's advocate is not that severe of a role, right? You're just kind of like, hey, could we try something different? And you try to be, throw out different things or different ideas. And so it usually works out pretty good. But in that case, it was kind of an extreme thing where I was just like me versus everybody else. And then finally, it didn't really resolve until we had layoffs. They decided to have layoffs. And everyone else on the team, including the manager, got laid off. And they kept me. So that kind of made that whole situation go away.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Danielle.
All right, so I just have a couple closing questions. The first one is, in your 20 years of experience, what advice would you give to a new leader?
So I think there's 4 things that leaders do. And the first one of those is to visualize what's supposed to be, to visualize the change. And this can be anything, right? So if I think, why do we always run out of copy paper in the office? We should really just have, on one day every month, we should order enough copy paper to make sure that it lasts us the entire month. As soon as you see that something needs to be changed, I think you can take on the role as a leader. You're the one who's leading that effort at that point. Or it could be like, if you're Alexander the Great, one day you wake up and you go, I really should invade Persia. I really should rule over all of Persia, right? So, I think leadership can be anything, right? It can be huge. It can be very, very small. But the first step is somebody's got to picture what the change is going to be or what the situation should be. The second thing is they've got to kind of develop the plan. Then they've got to develop the organization and what the organization, how you accomplish that visualization, how do you make that happen? The third thing then is to kind of just be able to explain that to everybody. All the concerned parties, people that are going to do the work, people that are going to work for you, your customers, whoever it is, you have to be able to articulate to them what the change is going to be. Hey, every, first Monday of every month, we're going to sit down together and figure out how much copy paper we need, right? You got to be able to do that. And so then once everybody kind of knows what they have to do, the fourth thing is motivation, right? You have to be able to motivate people to get them to accomplish the change. And then I think it's an iterative process. You just continue as a leader to keep going through those 4 things. You keep reimagining what it should be, kind of change your organization, change your plan, keep explaining, keep motivating, and doing that over and over again until you get kind of the product that you want. I usually when I talk to new leaders or I start mentoring somebody who wants to be a leader, I give them a copy of a book that I read probably back in 1995, and it's called ZAPP, Z-A-P-P, The Lightning of Empowerment. And it's a short little book. It's almost like a little fable, kind of the way it's written. It's really pretty short. But it goes back to a lot of the things that I was talking about, which is, leadership is an energy, right? It's something that you either give to people or you take away. That's the leadership is the controlling of that energy flow back and forth. And so ZAPP was really about how you get people interested in doing more, in doing better, and not doing anything to ruin their natural motivation and things that you can do to kind of help them with that. So that to me is the first book. There's really, I think that's the first book. There was another one, how you build kind of a high performance team, how you make sure that they're empowered, that they can do what they can do, depending on what kind of team you're building. I think just the structure of the team and how the team operates is important. And then the last piece of it always is, for me, everything is always about the customer. The customer has to be at the center of your business, has to be at the center of your process. If you, as a leader, aren't taking care of the customer, somebody else will, right? That's what they always say. So I think you have to make sure that you understand who you're working for, who your customers truly are, and just make sure that you're in touch with them and that you're delivering some kind of value for them.
Okay. Before we close, do you have any questions or is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you for your time and speaking with us today. We'll be interviewing a couple more people later on this week, and we will be making phone calls next.
Thank you very much.